Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask the Minister for Infrastructure what arrangements are in place for licensing the exploration for the extraction of natural gas from under the seabed, if you will make a statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In April 2014, Tynwald approved the Offshore Energy Strategy Report, which included the recommendation that Tynwald supports the development of offshore wind, marine renewables and hydrocarbon energy sources in the Isle of Man's territorial sea in order to produce energy subject to projects receiving appropriate consents and planning approval. Following from this, under the provisions of the Petroleum Act 1986, a licensing round was opened in September 2017 using the same process developed by the UK Oil and Gas Authority to enable companies to explore the potential for hydrocarbons and undertake exploratory drilling. In the first steps of this process, the Department awarded a seabed production innovative licence to Kroger in October 2018 to permit the company to search for hydrocarbons, oil and gas, within a defined area of Manx territorial waters commencing on the 1st of January 2019. Such licences are divided into 3 exploration phases. Phase A is geotechnical studies and geophysical reprocessing. Phase B is seismic surveys and acquiring other geophysical data, and Phase C, exploratory drilling. Alongside the award of the licence, the company is also required to secure various consents and permissions for the activities undertaken. For instance, a seismic survey undertaken under Phase B has potential for environmental impact, and a permit for such a survey is required to be issued by DEFRA. The consenting process for this is administered by the Fisheries Division of DEFRA, delegated under the Marine Infrastructure Management Act 2016 and regulated under the Wildlife Act 1990. At the same time as the action required represents activity is defined under the Marine Infrastructure Management Act, there will also be required for the developer to apply for consent under that legislation. This will require the applicant to undertake environmental impact assessments and enable a full consideration of all aspects of any proposal for activity ahead of the decision being made. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. for the answer. Is the extension to the licence ready to be put into place? And what are the implications for the licence holder and the exploration of this resource? If the department fails to complete requirements by the end of this month, then potentially the process could end, and some have argued that could potentially be a way for this option to vanish completely. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the DoI awarded a licence to Kroger in October 2018 to search for oil and gas, beginning on the 1st of January 2019. The licence commenced at Phase B of the potential 3 phases within a licence, allowing them 3 years to complete the seismic survey associated with this phase. This survey will characterise the nature of the potential gas reserve. Should Kroger not complete the seismic survey by the 31st of December 2021, then the licence will expire. Kroger have asked for an extension until the 31st of June 2023 to complete the necessary work. Legal advice is that there will be no legal consequences from allowing the licence to expire. Any decision on extension requires the joint agreement of DoI and DEFRA. A recommendation on whether to extend will be made by these ministers shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK regulator, the Oil and Gas Authority, has recently released a report which states that decommissioning the UK's oil and gas facilities will cost billions more than previously expected, an estimated total of 60 billion. Around half of this cost will be borne by the UK taxpayer. Given the multi-billion burden this industry is placing on taxpayers in other countries, can the Minister give an assurance that there will be discussion around and indeed an agreement in place that determines who would pay to decommission the gas extraction equipment as part of the process of all parties deciding whether the project should go ahead?
Expanding the screen slightly, but Minister Crookall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to say that while that is not involved in this phase, but that will be part at some stage in the negotiations if anything was to go forward from this point on in the new year.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regard to your previous answer, there was reassurance that a gap in the contracts wouldn't nullify the existing potential, but I am concerned that the ministers may actually take this as an option, and we could end up with the possibility that there's no licence in place and nothing going forward. Is that a real possibility? And also in terms of the simple extension, is that what you're looking at? Are you looking for something in more detail? Because as this suggests, you actually look at the whole process again rather than just extending what we have on the table. And finally, if you're actually looking at the wider situation, would this be the perfect opportunity to actually include a licensing agreement to actually look at the guarantee of a price cap for future prices of fuel from that field? That could potentially help local people tremendously. Thank you.
The question is around arrangements in place for licensing the exploration extraction, and I'm conscious that we're potentially getting close to the Minister here prejudging an application, and I just caution members asking questions and Ministers answering them to be aware of that fact. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for the guidance on that. With regards to the price cap the Honourable Member mentioned there, yes, at some stage in the future that might come into the negotiations, but certainly we're nowhere near that stage yet. But it would be something to be thought about in the future, for sure. If only everything was as easy as yes or no as to whether we extend this. Negotiations, and this has been looked at for weeks. Members obviously aware, I think, of what's been going on in the background by his questioning. If not, he's a very clever man and very shrewd. If only it was as easy as yes or no whether to give this extension. Like I say, it's ongoing discussions between myself and the DEFRA Minister, and a decision will have to be made shortly, because obviously, as you are well aware, the licence does run out at the 31st, and we're absolutely aware of that.
Questions, please. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two technical questions, mindful of what Mr. Speaker has said. The first one is, can the Minister advise the capacity in which the DEFRA Minister and the DoI Minister are involved in this? Is the DoI Minister involved because of the territorial seas committee aspect? And secondly, is DEFRA Minister involved for two reasons? Firstly, because they're responsible for Marine Infrastructure Management Commission, from Fisheries Division, and secondly, because they're responsible for energy policy. And if that's the case, is there not an intrinsic conflict of interest between being responsible for speaking up for the industry through energy policy and protecting the environment, and doesn't Minister want to recognise that conflict of interest? Because I'm mindful that energy policy used to be the responsibility of the Department for Enterprise. And the second question is, can the Minister advise in respect of the existing licence whether or not it is guaranteed that if gas is found, hydrocarbons are found, that they can be exploited by the licence holder?
Mr. Speaker, to take the last part first, there is no guarantees at this stage, absolutely no guarantees at this stage. It is purely for seismic surveys, which is what they're looking for, the extension they're looking to do. They want to know what's down there, and I presume, go by conversations I've had and comments I've had back, an awful lot of people want to know what's down there, see what the value is and what the potential is to the Isle of Man, and I totally understand that. With regards to his first question, DoI's involvement in this is yes, because of the territorial seas, and DEFRA obviously, as was mentioned, because of the environment and things. There was a piece in the middle I've forgotten, which was
energy policy. Energy policy.
Yes, and their energy policy as well as down to DEFRA. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister if he would confirm? He said there would be no legal consequences if the department's determined not to extend the Phase B of this licence to this company. And also, would he clarify what considerations are taken into account when the two ministers are determining whether to extend that licence? Would it be, for instance, a consideration that Shell has pulled out of Cambo, the Shetland Islands, as does he feel that this is signalling a move away from hydrocarbon extraction as it becomes increasingly uneconomical and renewables a better bet? But also, will he have any consideration as to the island's requirements to reduce our emissions and our responsibilities to climate change when determining whether to extend that licence? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I did say that if we weren't to renew the extension, there is no legal consequences. I presume, if anybody wanted to, they could take out a legal petition Dolins against us, but as far as we know, there are no legal consequences for doing so. We are fully entitled to stop that. The Honourable Member mentioned just because Shell had pulled out up in, I think it was Shetlands, or up in, and what sort of signal that's sending out. On the other hand, there are people who are still taking out contracts, and we know that gas is going to be a transition fuel for the next 20-25 years. We know it's going to be around. We need to know what's best for the island and what's best for the environment. And I believe that if we were going to start extracting gas locally, that would be better than certainly transporting it from Norway or from Russia or anywhere else. But we just don't know what's down there, and they don't know, and they want to find out. I think we need to know. Well, I'll just wait and see. And as far as the Isle of Man emissions are concerned,
I need to draw your back towards licensing, because they're open to some questions. I need some answers for wondering on the subject as well.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, because the final part was about emissions, but I'll leave that then because it wasn't about licensing.
It's more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In terms of the ongoing licensing discussions, is the existing party with a licence the only one who applied for a licence in the first instance? And is the Minister aware that British government are actually currently issuing new licences with the aim of improving energy security and the availability of this fuel transition? Thank you.
Originally, Mr. Speaker, there were two applicants, and Kroger proved to be the worthwhile one. And so, if the licence wasn't extended, we might go back to that again and go out to the field again, look for expression of interest, but this is purely about Kroger at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first question was a general question. Can the Minister advise that when he talks about gas being a transition fuel till 2041 or 2046, he's not talking about the Isle of Man? No decision has been made as yet in respect of gas on the Isle of Man, or has a decision been made on the Isle of Man? And the second, more specific question, fully with reference to the licences, can the Minister advise why any company would pay to do seismic surveys if they didn't expect to be able to exploit any hydrocarbons they discover? Because it seems to me a bit of a strange concept that you pay for something if you weren't able to exploit what you might discover in your seismic surveys.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regarding to the date of 2045 with the transition fuel, that's a date that's been bandied around and is generally accepted. That is movable, but it's just a date that I've taken as being banded around and people are working to. Regarding to the licences, sorry, remind me?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just the Minister made a categorical statement. There was no guarantee.
Oh yes,
that the licence
yeah.
could exploit the gas. I just
Yeah.
wanted to see perhaps it would be helpful to circulate to members and perhaps the general public exactly what he meant by not guarantee, given that I think seismic survey would be undertaken unless there was a possibility of exploiting what was discovered.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, phase B is purely for the seismic surveys, and then phase C will be testing, but absolutely not at this stage is there any guarantees of drilling. Ask me why, I don't know, but that's the way it is, and that's what's accepted at the moment.
Question 8.